Paul Taylor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. Delighted to be here.
So yeah, you've got the book. It shook me a bit. You've got the podcast. I like your stuff. I'm interested. And I thought I'd get you on because I've just always said, as long as I've had a microphone, you can't be the best version of yourself if you're not the best version of yourself. And a lot of people might listen to this show trying to invest better, build a business, buy an investment property, buy the first home, we're getting out of debt, all these big financial goals. But all right, this is wild. It's like we can do all this stuff, but at what cost? Number one,
Yes.
if you're stressing your bloody mind out. But two, if you're not the best version of you, it's going to be harder to achieve. And those goals, you might not stay plugged into those goals, because the wheels might fall off in terms of your health or your mental health. So I've broke down 4 kind of sections, health and science, lifestyle and performance, mental resilience and psychology, and technology and society and all that. So I've just thrown you a heap of stuff that's against the wall, and take this wherever you will. But basically from the book and all your work, what was the biggest aha moment for you with all your, latest research that led to the book and that keeps you going?
Yeah. But before we jump into it, I'd like to add a third one to what you just talked about, right?
Go for it.
Because I have dealt with corporates for many, many years and a lot of senior executives. And I see over and over again people absolutely busting a gut to earn money to have a great retirement, and the amount of senior guys that I've then spoken to when they've retired and have gone, actually, I screwed my health up and I'd now give all my money to get my health back. So for me, wealth and health have to be completely intertwined. And what is wealth without health? And we know the average Australian now lives about 10 years of their life in ill health, riddled with chronic disease. And that is supposed to be the best years of your life. And people have screwed it up. So that's the one thing I would throw in there as well. But I think the biggest aha moment for me was linked to that, was just, and it was the reason I wrote the book, is that we have it easier than all of our ancestors, right? Life is so much easier today, despite all the talk about how hard it is. It's not hard compared to our ancestors, yet we are the most overweight, most depressed, most medicated, and most addicted cohort of adults that there's ever been. And that's across Western societies. So clearly something is wrong with the way we're living modern life. If we have it easier than all of our ancestors, yet we are going through what we can only describe as a twin physical and mental health crisis. And I'll give you a little bit of data around that, right? Right now, 1 in 2 Australians, and when I say Australia, you can then copy and paste for America, Canada, UK, New Zealand, and most Western nations, right? 1 in 2 is living with a chronic condition, and that's not older adults. That's all Australians. And then once you hit my age north of 50, it's the norm to be living with more than one chronic condition. And then when we look at mental health issues, 22% of Australians are suffering from a mental health condition right now, and it's similar across the world. And a whopping 40% of teenage girls have experienced a mental health condition in the last year. Suicide rates are going up across the board. So clearly there's a problem with the way that we're living modern life. And that for me was the big aha moment, is that I've just got to write a book and influence some people.
So, if I can just maybe set some terms of reference, and maybe just one, when we talk about chronic health, what's that definition? Is it like I'm living with a thing each day?
Yeah, a condition, a chronic condition, right? So it doesn't have to be a disease as such. No, it can be a disease. So it can be somebody living with cardiovascular disease. It could be somebody living with diabetes. It can be somebody who has chronic pain, who has arthritis, any of those different things and that's something that is there and is chronic. It's been there for a while, and that you're actually living with it. And, people can get around it, and some of these things don't kill people, but they certainly impact the quality of life.
Yeah. You talk in the book about the evolutionary mismatches in our environment.
Yes.
What do you think is the most dangerous habits that we have adopted in our recent history of humanity on Earth? And I don't know if it was in your book or it's probably known everywhere, but, most of us are living better than a king lived 400 years ago or 200.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. It wasn't my book, but that is absolutely true. We lived better than a king 400 years ago. For me, there's probably three major things that we're doing really, really badly, right?
Yep.
The first, I'm going to start with a quote from Professor Frank Booth, who's a legendary exercise physiologist, published many, many research papers. And he wrote in a research paper that's really stuck with me. The human genome has not changed in over 45,000 years. The current human genome requires and expects us to be highly physically active for normal functioning, right? Note the way he didn't say optimal, he said normal functioning. Our genome runs off physical activity. We have always been active, and when you're not active, you fall apart metabolically over time, right? Mm-hmm. What most people don't realize is just how intertwined movement is with gene expression, right? So gene expression is different to your genes. Your genes are what you get from mum and dad, but those genes are turned on and turned off. And environment can actually do that. And when we're physically inactive, we actually silence a lot of protective genes and we switch on a lot of genes that can be bad for us if they're turned on for long periods of time. And what we know with physical activity is that every time you're contracting your muscles, so it doesn't matter whether you're running, lifting weights, gardening, dancing, you are producing these molecules called myokines, which are messenger molecules that when I did my first master's in sports science 30 years ago, we were told what they do is they take fat and glucose and turn it into energy for muscular contraction, and then they help your muscles get bigger, faster, stronger. And that's true. But we now know that these myokines get outside of your contracting muscle and they signal to every single organ and every organ system in your body to actually be better. To perform better, including the brain. So let me give you an example. In the brain, myokines trigger the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which protects the brain cells that you have against damage, but also helps to create connections between brain cells and even creates new brain cells. And we know that that's possible in certain parts of the brain, even in your 90s, but you need this BDNF. And myokines actually trigger the release of BDNF. And then they have, I could go through lots of different organs and organ systems and how they do it, but it's basically when we move, we're producing chemicals that signal to our organs to actually be healthier. Right. So that for me is the most dangerous habit, is our chronic lack of physical activity, and particularly in kids, because we set them up for a lifetime of trouble if they're not physically active. Then the next thing is around about 50% of calories consumed in Australia, United States, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Canada are ultra processed shit. Right? That's
the technical term, isn't it?
It is a technical term. So the term ultra-processed foods actually came out of a university in Brazil, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And I have on my computer at least 100 research papers on the health risks of ultra-processed foods. So let's define what they are. Very, very simple. It's shit that has never been alive. Right? So I like to talk about a low HI diet, where HI stands for human interference. Basically, if you're looking at a piece of food and you can see that it's been alive recently and minimally interfered with by humans, eat it. It's fine. That's what our ancestors have eaten. But if you're looking at a piece of food and you're going, Mr. Krispy Kreme donut, I don't remember seeing you running around on four legs, then...
Or growing.
It's in your treat foods, right? And so ultra-processed foods are things that are made with large-scale industrial process. They're made in factories. They often have food-like substances, but not real food. And then they have things like emulsifiers that make them feel amazing in your mouth. They have preservatives to increase their shelf life. They also have components that like flavor enhancers that we know are actually really damaging for your gut microbiome, both the preservatives and the flavor enhancers, right? And they typically have 5 or more ingredients, right? So if we look at breakfast cereals, the vast majority are an ultra-processed food. You know, the best breakfast cereal is the bloody cheapest, rolled oats. It's the only one that you can look at it and go, you've been alive and minimally interfered with by humans.
I had oats this morning, but I had the 90-second quick oats.
That's bad shit, man. You see the difference in your blood sugar between normal rolled oats and quick oats? Yeah. It's like night and day. Yeah. Because when they've been cut up like that, they're pre-digested, right? Yeah. So you've taken what's a really good food and turned it into a process. I wouldn't call that ultra-processed. I'd call that processed. That's probably still better for you than most of the other breakfast cereals, but don't do the quick ones, right?
All right.
And there's a comfort thing, right? That's a comfort and convenience. Hey, it's quick. I can save myself 90 seconds or whatever it may be here so that I can spend that time buried in my friggin' phone.
Yeah, now you're talking.
So I think the second one is our diet. And in the United States and the United Kingdom, see, we don't have, the last data we had in Australia was 2008, and it was 42% of calories. We know now it's more than 50%. Recent research in both the UK and in United States showed that teenagers, 67% of everything they eat is ultra-processed crap. This is the reason why young people are getting bowel cancer at crazy rates, because this stuff is just terrible for your digestion. It interferes with your gut microbiome. That then interferes with your brain through the gut-brain axis. And there was an umbrella review, which is a review of reviews and is the best form of evidence. And it basically said class 1 evidence, which you rarely see in nutrition, because nutritional studies are very hard to do properly. But class 1 convincing evidence that increasing your ultra-processed food consumption increases your risk of cardiovascular disease by about 48%, anxiety by 48%, and common mental health disorder by 53%. Right? So a lot of the reasons why we have poor mental health is shit diet and lack of physical activity. And then the third one, when you throw in this trifecta, is crap sleep and really poor sleep hygiene. Like having devices in bedrooms is absolutely criminal. And I actually say there'll be a lot of parents listening to this. I'm hardcore on this one. If you let your kids bring a device into their bedroom at night, it is tantamount to child abuse. We know that kids who bring a device into their bedrooms sleep on average 1 to 1.5 hours less than their peers, and they have double the incidence of mental illness. Like sleep, when you mess with sleep, you mess with your biology. And we are just too stimulated these days to have good sleep. And that, particularly when you mix those three, that is a massive trifecta for poor health.
Yeah, I've been on a bit of a journey myself. And if, my listeners who have heard me in the last few months or year, like last year for me was an absolute train wreck. I had some stuff going on that was beyond my control, that was deeply emotionally taxing, deeply financially taxing. And, when you totally go through that and you just cop it, you don't feel like going for the walk.
Yes.
You don't feel like eating well.
Yeah.
And because last year I turned 40 as well, in June around my birthday, I had a routine blood test. For the first time in my life, cholesterol was high.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, you might want to stop eating rubbish, and all that stuff. And I'm like, I know exactly what that is. It's the Guzman Gomez, it's the takeaway food, it's the Hungry Jacks, it's because it's this comfort food when you're depressed or you're sad and you're not exercising, it just all spirals. So since, I got through that stuff and I'm now able to actually plan and be dialed in with my diet and all that stuff. Got a blood test 2 weeks ago. Cholesterol's back to normal. So it was the first time in my life that I've actually seen a real-time cause and effect to my physical body. Now, what I've done, and I'll give these guys a shout out if you are in Central Coast, Sydney or Newcastle. I've recently, because Paul, I live by myself and I don't enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
And I just want it to be healthy. I want it to be easy and I want it to be like fast. I don't actually heaps care about taste. Like I just want to be full, healthy, easy. Yeah. So I use these Activate Foods and their pre-made meal delivery because I thought I'm happy to invest the money, $13, $14 a meal, not a lot. I get them weekly. And even in the last 3 weeks, I haven't changed anything, but I have this for lunch and dinner. I've lost 5 kilos.
Yeah.
And I am overweight. And all I've done, I really wanted to bench test this, like it sounds really dumb, but I'm not turning up my exercise regime. I'm doing this for a month. I'm seeing what happens to my weight.
Yeah.
And the weight's just fallen off.
Yeah, and very good reason for that. Yes.
Yeah, and then finally, my tirade, and this is just to encourage everyone that we're all human. We go through periods. We get in bad habits. I'm no different than you. Paul's no different than you. We just need to keep encouraged. When you are eating healthy, when you are eating 2 hours before bed and going to bed before 10:30 and all that stuff, you have a better sleep anyway. So this all compounds to the positive as opposed to the compounding to the negative.
Yeah, it's a downward spiral versus an upward spiral. And let me give you a little bit more color and maybe some insights. So last year when you were chronically stressed, so Professor Bruce Ames' triage theory is absolutely brilliant. What he showed is that when you are stressed, your body robs your brain and nervous system of nutrients to produce stress hormones. That's why your cholesterol went up as well, right? Not just the food, because stress hormones is made from cholesterol. So when you're stressed, your cholesterol will actually go up.
Because cholesterol isn't in my family history.
Yeah. I can tell you now, I guarantee you, a lot of your raise in cholesterol was because your body was in a crisis and it needed to make stress hormones. And in order to make more stress hormones, it has to boost your cholesterol, right? So that's one thing. So what's happening now is your brain is robbed of nutrients. That means your brain is not working very well. That means you're starting to get depressed. Your mood is dropping. Your motivation has dropped off. That then means you're not motivated to exercise. And then you get all that compounding effect that I talked about. It then starts to impact upon your sleep. And then when your sleep's crap, you're hungrier the entire next day because ghrelin is higher. Leptin, which is a powerful driver of physical activity, is low after a bad night's sleep. And because cortisol, the stress hormone, is high, it makes you crave sugary, fatty, and salty foods, right? And all those fast foods are available everywhere. So you did a normal human response to a very stressful thing. But what's happened now is you've got all that comfort and convenience available to you. So you're then eating shit food and it's compounding and it's making everything worse, right? And so what you've now done, sorting yourself out, and the reason why you've lost so much weight is that you're eating 2 meals a day that are portion controlled and calorie controlled and are decent food, right? So that's why the weight is starting to drop off you. Like exercise is not a good way to lose weight. It's important for weight maintenance, but just you can't outrun a bad diet, right? That's the key thing.
I've tried.
Yeah, and you can't.
But it's just so fascinating because I was in this position where last year, in my business, we run all these podcasts. I couldn't be active in my business because I wasn't in the right headspace. The business was declining. I wasn't active, but I need to be present and active to make income, to generate an income. And I can't do that if I'm stressed, depressed, and in bed. Like,
that's right. And then you're not making income, so it's an extra stress on
exactly.
you.
Yeah.
Right.
Getting financial stress from that.
And we get that real negative spiral, right? Which becomes harder and harder to get out of. And I always say to people, so I talk about that spiral, and I actually use the concept of a whirlpool, because the lower down you get, the stronger the downward pull actually becomes, right?
Yeah, gosh.
So when you see yourself starting to go off the rails a little bit, early intervention is absolutely critical, right? And you're now seeing the benefits of getting yourself back up to the surface and then starting to do some positive stuff, and then you get an upward spiral. Then you're like, then your brain goes, hey, this shit is working. And you know what that releases? Dopamine. Motivation, right? Many people are sitting waiting for the motivation fairy to come along and give them a big dollop of motivation. What we now know, there's a whole heap of neuroscience experiments. Your brain releases dopamine, which is the chemical of motivation and goal-directed behavior, when it knows that you're in forwards motion towards your goal. So just the fact that you then started to sort your shit out and started to see some results, right? Self-efficacy, the belief that what I'm doing is making a difference, is the biggest driver of long-term behavior change. Then that upward spiral really starts to kick in.